Well, welcome everyone for this is our fourth Focus Friday. For those of you who are sitting here for the first time, this is a new initiative from the Huntsman School. We heard it really, the genesis of it is really from our friends in the employer community who talked about the need for the school to work more actively on career development for our students who soon may become your employees. So Huntsman School does not have any classes on Fridays, and we devote all the programming on Fridays to career development. The 10 o'clock hour is this conversation we have with a senior executive, and before we get started with David, let me just put in a plug. At 11 o'clock we have two different panels. One is on leadership with some of our recent alumni from Honeywell. And then we have a second panel at the same time on analytics. We have Tessa White from Vivint Solar and four other very diverse set of employers in that analytics panel. And I think one of the things that you'll get out of at least that panel is how much data rules decision making with companies today. So that's immediately following our panel today. And then one other item of note, next week at this same time, Steve Milovich, who is the Senior Vice President of HR for Disney, will be our guest in the Leadership Forum. So with that, let me just welcome Dave Bywater. David and I actually got the opportunity to get to know each other 2 summers ago now. Yep. We had the opportunity to travel with the governor on a trade mission to Europe, and so a lot of quality hangout time.
Yeah, it was a lot of good
in a bus.
A lot of bus time.
A lot of bus time. Yeah. So help me welcome David Bywater. He's the CEO of Vivint Solar and COO of Vivint.
All right.
So David, let's start a little bit with that. You've got two seemingly massive jobs here. So what's the typical day for you?
Well, so first off, before we start, have you noticed how all of the students sit on that side?
Yeah.
You have this amazing view, but nobody wants to enjoy it. Yeah. It's just
we take that for granted.
Kind of awkward. Yeah, it's stunning. So, well, it's great to be here. It's great to be at USU. You guys are lucky to have Dave part of USU. As we've gotten to know each other over the last few years, it's been fun. What I love about what Dave is doing, and we were talking about this beforehand, is I went here my freshman year and part of my sophomore year, and then I got distracted and got pulled down south to finish up my school.
We won't mention that.
Yeah, it's just south of here. But it's amazing what you guys have done. Every time I come back to USU, there's this energy and this amazing kind of this theme that I feel like it's, and we've talked about this before, it's like, why not us, right? Why not dominate? And I love it with the students from USU, I love it from the faculty, I love it from the campus, and it's just amazing. I grew up in Cache Valley, and so to see what's happening at USU is awesome. So to take your question, I joined Vivint about 3.5 years ago, and 4.5 months ago, and I was the Chief Operating Officer for Vivint. And we really worked on transforming that business from what it was to what it is today. And that transformation has been pretty dramatic, to be honest with you. And then to answer your question, 4.5 months ago, they asked me to take a leave of absence from Vivint to be the CEO for Vivint Solar. So 95% of my time now is really on the Vivint Solar side. I still do a few things with Vivint. We still do a lot of collaboration on things. But the majority of my time, it occupies every ounce of my focus. And that's where I focus most of my time.
So what's a typical day for you?
You know, my typical day is always started at 5 a.m. It has for 30 years. Mm-hmm. My father taught me that years ago, to stop watching TV and to get to bed around 10 p.m. So I kind of shut down at 10 p.m. and I'm up at 5. And for me, I get up, I exercise not nearly enough, but I always plan out the day. And I always try to figure out what do I need to accomplish that day to ensure that when I come home, I earned my keep that day. Mm-hmm. I'm in the office between 7 and 7:30, and I usually wrap up between 6 and 7, sometimes 8 p.m. and then get home, try to be with the kids and my wife, who's awesome. And then once again, try to plan out the day a little bit. And in the morning, I can't stop thinking at night. So I'll wake up probably once or twice in the middle of the night and take notes to myself and then plan the day. So it's a pretty intense day, but it's a full one. I like it.
Good. So tell us a little bit about what each of the companies does. What does Vivint Solar do, and then what does Vivint do? So
great. So Vivint is really been working on owning the home, around home, being a smart home. And what is a smart home? A smart home is really trying to make sure that your most important investment you've made in your life, most likely, is the safest environment it can be, the most efficient environment it can be, and complement how enjoyable it is. So Vivint used to be just a security, used to sell third-party security systems for people. And a few years ago we said, we're undifferentiated. How are we going to win and dominate this market? And there are dozens and dozens and dozens of Me Too's. And for us, it was very clear, let's go actually innovate our way into a dominant position. And let's go create this industry, because it really was quite nascent. At the time, Google wasn't in it, Apple wasn't in it, AT&T really wasn't in it. And when I joined 4 years ago, 95% of our sales were truly just a security system. And we were charging customers about $40 a month for about 5 years to have security, which was just blah, blah. And then we said, well, let's actually go dominate this industry. Let's go bring true innovation and see if we can transform it. And so we went out and we said, let's get the door locks to work. Let's go put cameras into your home. Let's go put in a doorbell camera. Let's go put in motion sensors. Let's go transfer the home so it's not just a security environment, but one that actually regulates energy more efficiently today. And let's use data and sensors in the home to make sure it's truly intuitive on what you want. So how I would describe it today is we have voice control. You can walk into my home and you can speak to Alexa, which is actually a third-party product from Amazon, but we're the first to integrate it within our entire home. And I tell it what I want my home to do, whether it's entertainment or to lock the home up or to turn the lights on or turn the lights off, to regulate my thermostats. And then when I'm gone, my home, years ago, really a smart home was a remote control home, where you would say, turn off the lights or lock the doors or arm the system. But you had to do something. And then it evolved to rules-based. Hey, if I'm gone from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., turn down the thermostats. But today, we have so many sensors in the home, I don't tell my home what I want it to do. It tells me what it should do. So I'll get 2 texts a day and it says, we're going into, we can tell no one's home and we're conserving energy, or it does things that I want it to do. What we're trying to do is bring analytics to bear and the data and the sensors so the home interacts with you the way you want it to interact, but you didn't really realize you wanted that to have happen. It's like a really, really good personal assistant that makes your life easy, and you're like, I'm so glad he or she is in my life.
Yeah.
On the Vivint Solar side, we're really just trying to bring green energy to the world. And so we've really innovated around some really creative ways to make it affordable for homeowners, to be able to put a power plant on their roof and to be able to generate the energy for their home. So if you put the two of them together, a smart home in our mind is a home that has smart production and has smart consumption internally. My house, I wanted to make it net zero, where I had no more utility bills forever. And the combination of those two things, I have a 3-step process. First was to bring smart home into and consume better. The second was to put solar on my house in a very intelligent way. And I've got now to where about 70% of my bill no longer exists, which is pretty material for most homeowners. And then the third step is to have my kids move out. So we're working on that. So
I want to do that with my house. So
Have
where
the
do
kids- have the
you
kids
go?
move
Where do you
out,
go?
or-
Both.
both of them.
Is it online?
It can be online. We have a very professional sales force. It's still a consultative sale. So most folks, Jason Baugh is here, good colleague of mine here in Cache Valley. He'll go work with homeowners and help them design the right system for them. And in this situation, most of them save a lot of money. But you can go online as well and procure the services, but we'll still have people come out and do the professional install and make sure it's perfect for your home.
You also have, if I remember right, when we visited, an internet.
We also,
business,
yes,
right?
it's a great question. We actually have 4 businesses that fall underneath the Vivint umbrella. Blackstone, which is, I think, the largest private equity firm in the world, came in and purchased Vivint for about $2 billion in the fall of 2012. And so they still own the majority of us. And during that process, we've incubated 4 businesses. So we have the smart home business. We have the solar business, which we spun out through an IPO in October of 2013. And then we have an internet business, which is a wireless internet, trying to bring really fast speeds to anybody at a really good price point. And then we have a data storage company where it's all cloud-based. And so really those 4 businesses make up the portfolio that we have today.
Great. And the internet business, so I think the way you put it to me was that most communities across the country will never get Google Fiber, for example.
Yeah.
So Cache Valley, so I think Google Fiber is now in Salt Lake, if I remember right. It's been in Provo for a while, but it likely will never come to Cache Valley for lots of different reasons. But this line that you have can get us pretty close to that speed.
Pretty close. So if you think about the cost, I love what Google's doing, trying to bring higher service of internet access and speeds to the masses. It's super expensive. When you have to dig up and lay fiber, it's amazing how many pipes and electrical conduits are there, and it's a super expensive way to do it. And if you have Google money, you can do that.
Yeah.
Now, how sustainable is it? It's a question. So I like what they're doing. Well, we said, well, can we do the same thing? Can we actually bring gigabit speeds to the masses and do it wirelessly? And so we've developed a technology where we'll use towers that exist throughout communities, and they'll do a direct beam to your home. And as long as you don't have a lot of obstruction, we can get you extremely high speeds without that expense. And so we've done it now in several communities throughout Utah, in Texas, and I think also New Mexico, where they're working on perfecting that gigabit speed and not have to go through the ground. So it's a great solution for a lot of communities that want that service at a price point that's very attractive.
That's great. Well, thank you for that. I think it certainly helped me when I visited with you to know all the different businesses that Vivint is involved in. So let's go back to you said you grew up in Cache Valley.
Yeah, so get better. This is home.
Tell me about that. What were your early years like?
So when I was a kid, I lived in Los Angeles, and then we had to move away for just health reasons for my mom, kind of the smog. So we located in Smithfield, Utah, and my father was an educator, and I was here until my 20s, and then I moved away.
Skyview High School.
Skyview High School, proud Bobcat, yeah. And so here living, my challenge was, I don't know about you, Dave, but I didn't know what to do. I had 5 sisters, and a few of them came to college here, some of them didn't, and all of my uncles were farmers and ranchers, and my father was the only one that was an educator. And so I knew I wanted to get an education, and I knew I was interested in business, but I had no idea how to do it. Yeah. I had no idea how to circumnavigate and figure out where I wanted to go. So one day I was driving home from school, and I had this epiphany. And what my father and I had done, and my mom, is we had always bought homes and renovated them and turned them into rentals. So maybe some of you guys have, we had a lot of college students over the years. And I thought, well, how do I, that's the only thing I knew, is my only point of reference in business. And I thought, well, I should go do that with businesses. I should go run companies, fix them up, and then sell them. And how do I do that? Well, I should probably get some strategy experience. I should probably get some finance experience, and I should go run some companies. Then I'll go do that. So that was my epiphany. And so I, without any reference of knowing what to do and how to do it, I started on a plan where I said, between the age of 25 to the age of 35, I'm going to go get as much experience as I possibly can with the best companies I possibly can. And so I ended up going and working for a consulting firm out in Boston. And then I went and did some mergers and acquisitions, some investment banking, also back east. And then I went to business school. And then post-business school, I went back to consulting for a while. And then I finally said, I got to run some companies. And so I think I was in my early 30s. I said, now's the time. And so I joined a company, and over the next 10 years, ended up running about 62 companies. And these companies were, they were 100 million in size, a billion in size, 10,000 employees, or 1,000 employees. But I would always go take companies that were underperforming or not achieving their full potential, and go turn them around or grow them for 3 or 4 years, get them to where they need to be, and then I take a whole new set of companies. And so that's been my career. It's been a lot of fun, and it all tied back to some Cache Valley kid trying to figure out what he wanted to do and have an epiphany on how I wanted to make my career unfold.
Oh, that's great. So let me unpack a little bit of some of that. You went to business school at Harvard.
I did.
So you're sitting at Harvard and recruiters are coming constantly and you're weighing some options. So how did you decide on that one employer that you went to from Harvard?
So I was not very good at it. I found out that what I love is I love business, and I was industry agnostic. So I was as interested. It was an interesting journey. I was as interested in real estate development as I was in a grocery store in San Antonio, Texas, called HEB. They were super innovative in that industry. As I was with Disney, as I was with investment banking, and I was interviewing with all of these different firms, and I couldn't figure out. Nothing gravitated and said, this is what you should be doing. And then I realized I actually just love business. And so in my world, I was like, well, if I just love business, it doesn't matter about the industry per se, it's about the opportunity. And so I shifted my focus on who I wanted to work with, which is where could I learn the most with the best mentors and be located where I wanted to work. So I changed that Rubik's Cube from industry and brand name to, those things. And so I really focused on environments where I could get as much exposure to business as possible. So I chose consulting again to do that. I worked for Bain & Company for a long time. And then I was really selective on, who I wanted to be my mentors. And I was really lucky. The mentor matters a lot. And I would really encourage you guys to invest in the mentors and the alums that you have. If you can find the right mentor, the reason why it's so powerful is they will create differential opportunities for you. Because we all look the same. We're all, for you guys, you're all young, you're relatively inexperienced. And if you can find a mentor who says, I love what you bring to bear, and I'm going to make your career a success. Let me help you with feedback. Let me help you with differential opportunities. Let me help you prepare for business school. Let me be the person who writes your letters of recommendations. And let me help you stand out from your peers. It matters less on the company as it does about the experience and how they can articulate that to a business school. So I kind of changed it up a little bit, and then I just realized I love running companies, and they have been very varied over the years, but that's what I do. That's what I love.
So how long were you with Bain?
Total for 4 years.
Okay.
And I did consulting for almost 3 years before that.
Right.
And then investment banking for 3 years.
So as you went from Bain to these different companies and now to Vivint, what was the thought process to, I'm interested in that, so I love what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I think that sounds really interesting. How did you think that through to make those hops?
So there's a mental mindset that I had to embrace. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, up until I was about 25, what I realized was that I was so worried about not failing that I was failing. Meaning I was playing it safe. Like you want to have the perfect grades. You start to narrow your world where you can succeed, and you actually avoid a whole gamut of opportunities. And so I finally realized, if I'm not failing 20 to 30% of the time, I'm actually not winning. And it was liberating for me. So when you're a consultant, some of the most insecure people in the world are consultants. They're wicked smart and they do a great job, but some of them are consultants because they're afraid to actually go do. And I was like, am I one of those folks? Am I so insecure that I'm afraid to actually go see if I can actually do this myself? And when I finally said, it's okay to fail, let's go find out, I said, well, let's go make a jump. And so I went to Bain and said, I have to go run companies. I can no longer tell people how to run a company and never have done that myself. I have to make payroll. I have to go figure out how to motivate people who aren't the top of their class. I need to go figure out how to fix things that aren't going right in actuality, not just on paper. And it was just a really, I just couldn't shake that need. That's what I wanted to do, and I had to go do it. And so for me, I looked for an opportunity where they would take a chance on somebody who had never run a company to let me go take a chance. And so in that situation, it was kind of interesting. It happened to be back in Utah, and I never thought I was coming back to Utah. I didn't think there was any opportunities. Things have changed a lot since then. And so I found a company that had a need and had a lot of companies that were kind of broken. And I jumped into it. I tell you, Dave, I think I've told you this before, the transition was hard. Because I recall a month into my new job, I was at 2 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday trying to figure out where these claims were because the system wasn't working and the programs weren't working. And I thought to myself, what have I done with my career? You know, Harvard MBA, Bain, and now I'm sitting in some little room at 2 in the morning on a Sunday and with a very unhappy client. And I'm like, I flushed my career down the drain. It's like, what have I done? And then it hit me. I was like, you know what? I'm actually doing exactly what I should be doing. Because if you're unwilling to do whatever as a business leader, you'll never be successful. And as soon as I changed my mindset, so that was like number 2. The first one was be willing to take risks. First one was make sure you work with mentors that you trust and respect. Second was take some risk. And if you're not taking risk, you're failing. And the third was be willing to do whatever it takes for the company to be successful. And then from that point forward, I've just chased opportunities where they've come to me. I haven't gone to them. I've never looked for a job. They've always come to me. And it's like, maximize that opportunity. Just kill that company. Just do an amazing job with that company. And if you do, great. And if not, you know, they will come find you to come help them. Yeah. So simple little recipes for life.
Yeah. So a couple of questions before we have some participation from our students. How do you hire? What are you looking for?
How do we hire, Tessa? I really rely upon word of mouth. So, you know, I'll get resumes all the time, and I look at the resumes, and you're always looking for excellence. So I love people who can show that they've been excellent at what they've done, but I really rely upon word of mouth. People who can say, you know, here's my need, and I'll talk to my network. Who do you know that fits this? And I'd probably say 80% of the people I hire, I've already vetted myself personally, and they've been endorsed by somebody. So that goes back to that concept of whatever you're doing, just make sure that you don't look beyond the mark. My father taught me years ago, he's like, David, I'll give you one piece of advice that will really serve your shoe well. He goes, never assume that your job is your job tomorrow. Meaning, earn your job every day. So when you go into work that day, you say, how do I get to earn my job today? And when I still do it today. When I drive home at night, I'm like, did I earn my job today? I'm the CEO of a company, of a public company. And I still have that insecurity, which is, did I earn my job today? And my dad said, the second that you believe that you've earned your job, you've lost it. It was great wisdom. And so, you know, it's the same thing when I hire people. I want people that are still hungry. I want them who have accomplished things, but they still attack their job every day to try to earn that job. And if you can get people like that, you're in a really, really good spot.
Yeah. Are there questions that you typically ask?
For me, I do. I'm always asking them to demonstrate, you know, there's a few things. One is I want people who have a very open mind. And so I'll often ask them, tell me about a time in your career where you've promoted diversity, right? Because the diversity matters. And if they're closed-minded, that's a topic. And if they can't champion where they've championed diversity on whatever metric you want to define diversity, and you know, some people are like, well, I've never thought about it. Well, that's an alarm bell. No, here's how I've promoted it. That's important. I'll have to give them a case. It's my old consulting days. Because what I'm interested in is, I'm not interested in if you know the answer. I'm interested in, can you think your way into an answer? So I'm always looking for people who can learn quickly. And if they can frame up a problem that they've never had before, and they can walk me through how they think, I don't really care if they have the right answer, but I'm always really interested in how they think. So I do that quite a bit. And then I love to have them tell me about a time where they've really moved the needle. And I'm pretty pedantic on the questions I ask on did they move the needle or did someone they were working with move the needle? And I love the people who don't oversell themselves. Hey, this was my role, here's how I did it, and here's where I moved the needle, versus I didn't draft off of somebody else, or I helped, how honest are they, and did they move the needle? So that's, that makes up 90% of what I ask.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So let's get some participation from here. Let's have some questions. We have Mike? Yeah, we've got a mic. All right.
Please.
2 mics, great.
Okay, my question is, so you said to always remain hungry. How do you, as the head honcho, remain hungry in your day-to-day work?
I like that, head honcho.
That's a great question. Head honcho. I'm putting that on my resume. Head honcho. I think you got to remember kind of where you came from. So I came from pretty humble roots, and I'm not perfect at it. There's times where I think, hey, I'm doing a good job, and then something happens the next day where I'm like, oh crap, I shouldn't have said that, or shouldn't have thought that. So a lot of it really comes back to how you were raised. I love USU. I love USU students because they're grounded. There's not this sense of entitlement that you have. For the most part, the students that I see come out of this university are people who know how to grind and know how to work hard, and they don't take anything for granted. The question is, I think most of us are that way, when we come out of school. It's how do you retain that? So, you've heard that in the past, which is never read your own press. You're never as good as you think you are, and you're never as bad as you think you are. There's a lot of wisdom in that. And so, for me, once again, I'm not perfect at this, but I remember the times where I've crashed and burned, and the best answer is get married. My wife keeps me humble, right? She reminds me often that I'm not that good, and so that's and she's right. So she's very right. If you want to call her up, she'll tell you that. But she's awesome. But just remember where you came from, and Tess and I were driving up here this morning. We're talking about a colleague of ours who is extremely gifted, and at times can forget that he or she, I'll keep it gender neutral, can still learn. And genuine humility with a hard work ethic is the perfect combination for you in your careers. The second you start getting arrogant or stop working, you're done. Good question, thanks.
That's great. You had a question up front here.
What did you look for in mentors, and what do you maybe still look for in mentors?
So my first mentor was a gentleman named Steve Delano. And Steve Delano, I got lucky, to be honest with you. He just had a genuine interest. Well, first off, he's a person I could emulate, both in work and outside of work. So they have to have integrity. They have to be people who treat people with respect. So, you want to find somebody who you literally say, I want to be like that person. So you have these baseline attributes of just how you interact with humanity. Do not sacrifice it. They could be extremely gifted, but if they're complete jerks and don't treat humanity the right way, you just don't want to associate with that. It will rub off on you. So do they resonate with who you are as an individual? The second part was, I learned early on in my career that they're always going to give me feedback, so don't be worried about feedback. Embrace feedback. No boss is a boss unless, no matter what you bring to them. Dave Patel, brilliant man. He can bring in a perfectly crafted presentation or whatever, or if I brought one to him, he's going to find something wrong with it. So I was like, well, you know what? As long as it's not more than 20%, I did a good job. So I embrace feedback, but you find mentors who would love to give you feedback. But also, if you can find a mentor and you say, I'm going to give you everything I've got to help you be successful, can I do 20% of your job? Not 80% of your job, but can I do 20% of your job? Can you help me lift 20 to 30% of your load? And if they look at you and they're like, that would be amazing. Like, I still have 70% where they lift their load, but they trust you and will help you find a way to lift their load. What's great about that is they have more leverage to do 20 or 30% of their boss's load, and you have become instrumental in their success. And they want you to be successful. So it's almost as if you're sitting down with them and you're having that agreement with them. Here's what I want to do. I want to make you successful. Is there a way that I can do some of your jobs, and can you help me do that? I'm open to feedback. They're interested in your feedback, and on a personal level, you respect who he or she is. Like, to me, that's the perfect mentor. To the extent that they actually have had a career of success, where you're like, I want to learn from that, that's fantastic. If they have connections with business schools or with whatever that you can leverage, fantastic. But those first few things are non-negotiables. Find that in your mentor. Good question.
How have your transitions from Xerox to Vivint Solar challenged you to innovate your own personal leadership qualities and attributes?
That's a tough question. Every business has its own rhythm. They have their own identity. And I think when you ever go into an organization, you'll have a mental model on what worked for you in the past. And you have to realize that in every situation, there are things that work for that company. There's chemistry. So Bod knows what I'm talking about. Jason Bod knows. The Vivint culture is a unique culture in many respects. But they have this can-do attitude, like we can pull off anything. And sometimes you're like, well, it sounds a little arrogant. But then you're like, that's amazing that these guys and these girls think they can pull off anything. So how do you channel that? So it's like when you walk into an organization, figure out what makes them successful and don't screw with that. And the things that aren't making them successful, go work on that. Sometimes people go in and want to change everything, and they hurt themselves by doing that. So discern what is good, don't break it, what needs help, focus there. And then when you get finished, there's a new mix. There's a new flavor that you've created, and that's good, right? Like a new flavor is a good thing, and embrace that new flavor. And as long as it helps you be successful and helps them be successful, it doesn't have to taste like the last flavor or the one from 4 times ago. It can be unique. Everything's unique. So, all right.
A question right here. Yeah.
Just yell it out. Small room.
Well, thank you for taking it, David. I'm curious about Vivint itself. You mentioned you were purchased several years ago, and you are pivoting to change from the solar and I think from the security system industry that was kind of this, hey, we're going to get out there, we're going to sell, we're going to do all this, and we're just selling third party to, we're going to move to an innovative. How was that pivot in trying to change the brand identity to those? Like, for example, where my background is from a school in Rexburg, Idaho, where that was very, very pushed. Hey, come sell for us, come see it. And I've seen that change from, hey, come sell and do this, to, hey, let's go change the way the world thinks about everything. So how is that brand pivot?
We could teach an entire course on that. We could be here for a while.
We'll talk about that at the end.
All right, sounds good. It has been one of the most rewarding transformations I've ever seen. And the reason why was it's been painful to some extent. When I talked about diversity earlier on, it was interesting because we had this organization which was really sales and marketing, third-party product with one direct-to-home model. And we said, well, what do we want it to be? We want it to be the largest tech company in the state of Utah. And we want it to dominate the smart home industry, which we're going to have to own, which is really technology and systems. And so the first thing we did, and I give a lot of credit to the founders, Todd Peterson and Alex Dunn, they got Blackstone involved, which was really interesting because when Blackstone came in, it caught the rest of our attention. We're like, hold on, why would Blackstone ever look at this company? So they pulled that off, and they did that through a lot of grit because the company was pretty valuable. And then they were able to bring in folks that you would never have put in the same room before. What does that mean? We at one time had 25 kids from Harvard, Stanford, MIT. We had 2 kids from USU and like 5 kids from BYU. But the majority of it was all Ivy League kids. We had kids, we had me from a large corporation. We had a whole bunch of people from Harvard and Stanford come in with MBAs. We brought in data analytics, these data scientists that did not necessarily clash well with folks who are out, selling. And we just realized let's mix this thing up and appreciate all the different views. And let's go, and we spent $100 million that Blackstone wasn't expected to sell, to spend on us. And we said, here's where we got to go and here's why we got to do it. We need $100 million. Let's go create an innovation center and go hire the engineers and go do this. And it's been quite the journey. And it all has rooted with embracing the fact that we had to do something different than we were doing, and having a vision and sticking true to that vision, and then bringing in the talent that would help us get there. And it was very different than the talent we had. And then there was this respect that developed over time, which was, we were so grateful for the sales force for what they do. And at one time it was 90% of all sales. And now almost 40% of the sales come from people, reading the Forbes magazine article this in July, which was, this little company dominates smart home. And we got people talking, we started to associate with Blackstone and with Utah Jazz with putting our name on this smart home arena. And we started to bring in talent that appreciated this flavor that was different, but they contributed to that flavor. And at first, that first year, it was like these competing factions, right? We're right, we're right, we're right. And then we're like, seriously, here's what we're trying to achieve. And people started to look forward to that common goal, and they started to appreciate one another, and this chemistry started to happen. And then magic started to happen. And then growth accelerated, differentiation happened, and people became a lot less egotistical and defensive of their position, and started to embrace kind of the common chemistry that was going on. And it's been interesting. So now we are the largest tech company in the state of Utah. We have more employees than anybody in that space, and we've done it in a very short period of time, and it's been quite a journey. And then we've spun off these other companies that say, one's going to take what's kind of unique about us and blend it. And so to spin off a solar company, be the number 2 solar company in the country in a very short period of time is pretty unique. And to do the same thing with wireless, you're taking on giants out there, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a good journey. The chapters aren't finished yet. We're still in the middle of it, but we like what's happened. So, it'll be a whole course, but it's been quite a journey. In the back, where do you want to go? You pick. I'm not picking, you pick. Who's next?
So can you talk a little bit about the reasons for wanting to spin off different companies and the benefits of taking those to an IPO?
Sure. The Vivint Solar was unique. It's very simple. We had bondholders in the Vivint company that were underwriting this new venture, and they're like, wait a minute, that's a risk profile I didn't sign up for. I'm a bondholder, right? It's only debt and repayment of debt, not equity valuation. So we were doing something that was very innovative, but not necessarily aligned with our bondholders. And then the market was out there for, at the time, they were paying a premium for what we were doing. And so there was just an opportunity for us to spin it out. And it helped bring unity and alignment with our financial backers. So that was really the purpose. And now we collaborate. There's still a lot of collaboration that goes on, but it was really kind of a financial mechanism to make sure we were aligned.
Great. Question in the back there.
Between your days consulting and running companies, what advice would you give to someone who would want to start their own business?
It's a really good question. I've never started my own business, so I'm probably not the most qualified person to answer that. But I will say this. There's a certain sense of moxie that you have to have and confidence to start your own business, which is God-given. And if you've got that, that's awesome. I would make sure you don't go off half-cocked. There is, I think there's some real value in getting some experience so you can avoid some of the mistakes that on someone else's dime or by learning from others. And so I really do think, for my daughter or my son, if my daughter and her son were in this room today, so I have a 17-year-old boy and I have a 20-year-old daughter, I would tell them this advice. I would say, take your 20s to go learn as much as you can from somebody else. And at age 30, if you want to run a company, go for it. Like, honestly, go for it. At that point, you don't have anything in the bank anyways. Your opportunity costs are not that large. It's a great time to transition. But do yourself a service and go get some experience and some wisdom and get some mentors and get some perspective and get some skills. I think starting a company when you're 50 is probably a little bit different unless you've got the bank account and it's, you can go make that jump. but I would get some experience. I would keep that moxie and that energy and confidence. I'd do it in your 30s. For my kids, I would say don't do it in your 20s. Probability of success is pretty low. It's probably higher when you have a little bit more experience. I don't know, Patel, do you agree with that?
I agree with that.
Yeah, but neither one of us are billionaires, so, discount.
He's a lot closer than I am.
So discount what we're saying. Good question, though.
How do you decide when it's time for you to leave a business and move on? Is that a personal decision, or do you have benchmarks goals you set for the business to reach before you leave, or something like that?
I get a phone call at 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday. It's usually how it's worked in my career. So I was with this company. We grew to about 100,000 employees, about $8 billion in revenue. We grew it to 115 businesses, and we sold that to Xerox. So then I became the COO of Xerox for 4 years. And so let me talk about that transition point. So during those 10 years, it was always, I had a very simple philosophy. What is the gnarliest problem the CEO of the company has? That's what I want to do, right? So I'm a run to the fire kind of guy. A lot of people run away from the fire. I'm like, what do you mean? That's where all the action is. So it can wreak havoc on your personal life. You might put a little weight on your belly, right? So you may have other consequences, but I've always been a run to the fire kind of person. So, for years and years and years, I'd always get a phone call, and I was never finished with those companies, but they're like, look, trust me, that you've made a huge difference. Here's a bigger issue. So that was my philosophy in life. When I chose to leave Xerox to go do Vivint, it was a different point in my life. I was at the point now where I was like, okay, financially, I'm good. What do I want to do for the next 10 years of my life? Do I want to continue to run a company that's 115 years old, or do I want to go dominate something? And I was having that reflective moment where I was like, I got another 10 to 15 years I want to work, and when I get finished, what am I going to be proud of? And then lo and behold, about 2 weeks later, I get a text from some guys that said, hey, Blackstone wants to meet you. Would you ever consider doing this? And so it was different, right? I had a different point in my life. And when I left Bain to go run companies, that reflection point was I had this plan, strategy, finance, and then run companies. And I was like, well, I'm not getting younger. I'm 30 years old, or 32, I think, at the time. I need to go run companies. So they were, that was part of my life plan. The other part was I was in my plan getting experience, and it was driven by this simple strategy to go work on the biggest, gnarliest problems of the company. And then later in life, it was, well, what do I want to stand for? What do I want to have accomplished? And it was funny, I actually wrote down on a piece of paper, I want to build a great company in Utah. I wrote this down before I even joined Vivint. I want to build the greatest company in Utah that will provide employment opportunities for my kids if they choose to stay here. And I want it to be industry defining. And it's kind of funny then a few weeks later, I had to figure out if that was the right opportunity, but it's turned out to be a pretty good one. So, different things at different times. I don't have a prescriptive answer for you, but that's what I did. By the way, we got to have at least 3 more females ask me a question before we wrap up. So thank you for leading the way. Awesome.
What would a person have to do to shadow you for a day?
For me? Oh man, you probably have to ask. We can talk afterwards. Yeah. I mentor a lot of kids, a lot of students, so we can find out how to do that. Talk to Tessa White right here. So she can make that happen. Okay, more questions.
I have
Ladies,
one.
please.
So you said that about 80% of your employees come from word of mouth or referrals. So what advice do you have to us if we're looking to a company that we don't know anybody at the company? Because I feel like a lot of companies are that same direction.
It's a really good question because I didn't know how to do it. I had no idea how to do it. I've seen some young students who have done a great job. So let me give you an example. About 4 or 5 months ago. So you know how college, the companies come on campus in the fall. I think it was back in June, I get a phone call. And it's this kid, he's the middle linebacker for BYU. He calls me up and he says, hey, I understand that you used to work for this consulting firm. I'm just a kid at BYU. I happen to be a middle linebacker. I got pretty good grades. They're not the best, but I'm a 3.7, and I really want to work for a consulting firm. And I'm not sure if they're going to look at me or not. I was so impressed by the kid to find me 4 months in advance acknowledge he probably doesn't have the 4.0, but he's played D1 sports, articulate that for me and show the initiative. He's like, can you tell me about what it took? And I was like, I'm going to help this kid. And by the time we finished the call, I'd called 3 partners at Bain and said, you got to look at this kid. And I was like more than happy to go open up an opportunity, and we'll see what happens with him. But for me, it was a person who was aware of who they are and took the proactive efforts to network. And there is no reason why everyone in this room can't do that, because it's very doable. Anybody from USU would love to help the next generation from USU, right? And I'm split. I'm split between USU, and I love USU, and I love BYU. Like, for me, I love both schools, and I get to tap into both alums. So it's awesome for me. But there's not a kid who reached out to me, and as long as they were respectful, they were thoughtful, they weren't, crappy students. Like, they can prove to me that they're going to take any opportunity I create for them seriously, because they've taken their prior opportunities and took them seriously. We're always looking for great talent. We're always trying to snag off people who was like, yeah, you can go there, but would you come here instead? But it's all about the initiative, and the alums, they love to help. They really do. So just networking. And today with social media, you can do it infinitely better than we ever could. We were looking through telephone books. So you guys can.
I think they know what telephone books are.
They don't know what it is. Yeah. But great question. Please. All right.
Okay, so I've read somewhere that when somebody is hiring a potential employee, so you have 4 seconds to make an impression and 7 seconds to change their mind. Okay. Do you believe in the same? And if yes, what are the parameters for the first 4 seconds, and what are the parameters for the next 7 seconds?
I don't know if it's that fast. Maybe it is. But it does happen pretty quick. And I can't tell you what the right equation is. I think it's God-given. It's like, when I meet somebody, do they look me in the eye? Do they have the confidence? Do they shake my hand with a real handshake? For me, that matters. Eye contact and a really good handshake matters. I love people who come off as confident but not arrogant. Arrogant, for me, does not work at all. I love people who can give you that impression of listening but also promoting who they are. And it's that blend of that. And then for me, once again, a referral from somebody, I'll buy them time. So it's not 7 seconds with me. If I have a referral, they've got an hour because they've already proven that to somebody else. If I've never met them before, maybe it is, a minute or 2. But pretty early on if it's somebody you want to invest in or they're rubbing you wrong. But it's more interpersonal aspects. It's things you learned in first grade, in second grade, and third grade, and that you haven't forgot, out of respect and confidence. So, and then once you get into the resume, you've worked really, really hard on that resume to earn the right for you then to be able to tell them what you've done. So it's a cumulative effect of things. But if it's a cold, first time I've ever met somebody, it's more on interpersonal skills on how you present yourself that then buys you the time to impress them again and again and again. But it's a really good point, and you know this. Every interaction you have with a person, just be aware you gain share or lose share every time you interact with somebody. And if you forget that, you're losing share. So just remember that, right? Every interaction you gain or lose share with somebody. And when you cash in on that share, it may be then or it may be later on, but you're always gaining or losing share with people. Was that helpful? Okay.
Okay, maybe one more question.
Thank you. And it's a female.
Great.
Love it.
How are you able to balance your family life with your work life and all the other aspects?
Sometimes really, really well. Sometimes really, really bad. And I'm okay with that, right? And what's awesome about that is my wife is okay with it. We gave ourselves a hall pass years ago that we're never going to have it perfectly in balance. It's like over a period of time, is it working for us? And I don't think I've ever had it perfectly balanced at a point in time. But so I look at this as a tapestry of my life, overall. And There are times where I overinvest in work. Like right now, I'm overinvesting in work. And my wife, she's like, you know what, I've got it. I got your back. And my kids, we got your back. And then things will calm down. And for 6 months, I'll be able to really overinvest at home. And so there's the things I don't do. I don't watch TV, right? I don't have a whole bunch of hobbies that take me. I don't golf, right? My life's pretty simple. I love running companies. I love my family. I love to fly fish, right? And I do love college sports. So I've come to a point in my life where I'm like, I know what makes me tick and makes me happy, and I'm okay with all the rest of the stuff that I don't do because I don't really care about it. So for you, I just give yourself a break. There's times where you're going to over-index on certain things, but when you look back on it, you're like, okay, over a 6-month time frame, over a 12-month time frame, over a 5-year time frame, do I have it where it's actually working for me and whoever's associated with my life? And if not, I was just out in Maryland. No, I was out in Connecticut 2 days ago, and I was talking to a gentleman who is one of our most successful. This individual probably makes a lot of money. He probably makes like $300,000-$400,000 a year. He sells for us. He's really, really gifted. And I was talking to him, and he's like, you know what? I've got to pull back. I can no longer do this leadership role and what I'm doing here. My family, I've got to pull back. And he was scared to tell me. I was like, peace, pull back, right? Keep your life in balance. And so, he was self-aware enough where he's like, I got to pull back for 6 months. I got to do something different. And I was like, that's cool. I want you here for 10 years. So ebb and flow and do what you have to do. Listen to yourself and see what you got to do. So, and don't beat yourself up too much, right? Over-index, under-index, depending upon your situation at that time with the people you have around you. So hopefully that's helpful. She's like, how do I apply that in my life? I'm not sure. But if you can figure it out, you're going to be awesome. So
That's great. If I could sum that up, I think one of the things I've told students is, I read this when I was your age in a book, Perfect is the Enemy of the Good.
yeah.
And it made no sense to me when I was your age. And it makes more and more sense. And I think that's part of that, right? Where it's not going to get to perfect, so give yourself a break, right?
Yeah.
Get to the good.
Yeah, so true. So true. Well said.
Well, thank you. You had talked about, as a response to a question, we could teach a course on that. So I'll give you a little bit of context. We spent a lot of time in a bus 2 summers ago.
And trains.
And trains.
Yep.
And one of those, right after, in a bus ride, David stands up and he said, I've just been to the 50th country of my life. I think it's
Number 50.
Luxembourg. I don't think neither one of us will ever go back there again. There's no reason.
We were there, though. Well, that's probably because we got thrown out, but that's all right.
Yeah.
We won't talk about that.
So 2 things in that interaction. So we were at a event hosted by the local Chamber of Commerce there. And I don't know, I was talking to somebody, and I see David coming towards me, and he says, I found an Aggie. It's one of the great memories, right? In Luxembourg, of all places, there was an Aggie, Ben Oates, with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Ben and his family were there with PwC, and then since then, they've come back. They're in Denver, and Ben was just here 2 weeks ago. I'll never forget that. What a out-of-the-way place to meet Utah State alumnus. And the next thing, we're back on the bus, and so David announced it's the 50th country, and he's always had this list of things that he wanted to achieve in his life, and one of those was to get to 50 countries, so he achieved that, and so somebody else asked in the bus, well, tell us some of the other things on that list. And one of them was to teach at the college level. And so I immediately raised my hand and said, I can help you with that. So consider this an invitation with all these witnesses. Come teach with us when you don't have a very full professional life.
Absolutely.
All right.
Love to.
Thank you very much.